Kenny Pickett has now said that he will for sure play against the Tennessee Titans, but is that going to be enough for this Steelers offense that struggled even when he's been healthy? And we begin to ask the question, will Kenny Pickett ever show signs of being the quarterback that they wanted him to be when they drafted him in the first round? That and why the Steelers made no trade deadline moves, as well as secondary challenges, all here on a Wednesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter, joined by Alan Saunders. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. As I said before, we're rejoined by my man Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Now, we missed you last week, Alan. Wasn't really your fault. It was more so the guy who wanted to be my plumber's fault and kind of messed things up in my house. But we're back, baby. We got you back on the show. We missed you on the grade segment. But a lot has happened, Alan, since you were last on. The Steelers offense that looked like it might be promising after the Rams game went right back to being the bad version of itself that we've seen pretty much all this season. And Kenny Pickett got injured, and now it looks like he is going to play in this game, Alan. I look at this and I look at the things that Kenny Pickett has to get better at for the Steelers, and it doesn't seem that the list ever changes from getting the basics done, making the consistent reads, making the consistent throws, doing the little things that are asked of him. And it's weird because we've seen him do it at times.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. First of all, we need to go back. I know that I missed the grade segment, but I need to give a bus ticket grade to your plumber.
Yes,
that's
ruined everything.
You got to put that one down in the ledger. It was his fault that I wasn't here last week, not mine. I know I got some flack in the comments.
There were people here giving you 3 skull grades for not being on the show, and I'm like, it wasn't Alan's fault.
Wasn't my fault. I kind of feel like we're there with Kenny Pickett too. You know, I have this problem where there's too many variables.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to separate the variables, right? I mean, first of all, we can talk big picture, right? I mean, Matt Canada has never run a successful NFL offense with 3 different quarterbacks.
Yes.
So if you go, I mean, so how do we know that the problem is Kenny Pickett and not largely the offense in general? Like, I don't know that we can know that, right? I mean, if you look at this, I looked this up the other day because somebody was asking just about like how much it would matter if Pickett plays versus Trubisky. Here you go. Kenny Pickett, since the start of the 2022 season, has completed 62% of his passes. He has a quarterback rating of 78 and an average net yards per attempt of 4.87. And in his time with the Steelers, also since the beginning of the 2022 season, Mitchell Trubisky has completed 63.7% of his passes, has a 76.9 quarterback rating, and a 4.93 adjusted net yards per attempt. Same thing.
Wow.
Like basically exactly the same results, whether you have Mitch Trubisky or you have Kenny Pickett in a quarterback for the Steelers. In general, over the last 2 years. I think you could get into specifics, and maybe we will. But so what does that tell me? I don't think it tells me anything other than there's so much that we don't know, right? I don't know where the problems are. Is it Pickett? Is it Canada? Let's get into some finer detail stuff here. What has happened to the Steelers' offensive line? this unit that we thought was going to be so much better this year, I think actually might be worse. I mean, this is not a good defensive line that they're playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. You look at the tape, it's ugly. I have no idea what's going on. Why are they failing? And again, this is the third straight unit that we can say is not very good. Steelers offensive line 3 years in a row. Is it the line? Is it their strategy? Is it their coaching? Is it just the offense? I don't know. There's too many independent variables to come up with like a big picture answer. And I think when you look at Kenny Pickett and you look at young quarterbacks like him that have above average talent but not elite talent, he's gonna need help. And I don't think he's getting it in a way that, like, your point is like, should we be expecting more from him? Like, in general, maybe, but like in this specific circumstance, I'm not sure that we can. I just don't know that we have the knowledge to say Kenny Pickett should be doing better than he is right now based on what's happening around him.
It's a good way to put it. And right now, those are real questions that, after 2 or 3 games this season, I'm like, give it more time. But we're at what, week 9 now? Like, we're at a point where this is becoming the season. After this game, they'll be 8 games into the season.
And the midpoint this week.
It's a midpoint right now. And this looks very much like still the same Kenny Pickett and the same offense that we saw last year, even when things started to go right for them in the second half of the season and they started to find a rhythm there. We haven't seen that jump up. Here was Kenny Pickett when we were asking him, one, him saying that he's going to play, and 2, when we were asking him about what the problems are on the offense.
Playing Thursday conducive to how you feel, or are there clearances you need from doctors, or is it a bit of both?
No, I'm playing for sure.
Is there anything other than rest you can do to make this along?
Some stuff, but with ribs, it's rest, and you don't have that luxury, so you got to do what you have to do to play.
Kenny, what do you feel like you guys have to do to get off to a faster start?
Execute. It's not about scripting. It's not about anything. It's about us playing and being better than we're doing right now. It's not where it needs to be, but it has to get better. Yeah. So that safety's shading over Deontay's side. I want to move him with my eyes to the right. I thought Deontay was going to sit. He saw it as he should have ran through it. It's miscommunication, but it can't happen.
Force into George, like how do you get more involved when he's getting,
yeah, that's tough. You can't throw a go ball if that corner's underneath and that safety's over top. You can't do it. We got to do some different things and moving him around. Deontay obviously was big early. He made a lot of plays for us, and then it swung over to George's side at the end when he had that slant for a touchdown. So it's about moving around, being versatile, and getting in the ball.
The drive where you got hurt and the one right before that, it looked like you guys were picking up momentum, stringing drives together. Were you able to find something maybe that you were able to do in the second quarter that had previously just been seen in the fourth?
You're saying the second quarter that we just had connected to fourth quarter success?
It looked like you were doing some things in that second quarter that before we'd really only seen from you guys moving the ball in the fourth.
I think we would have saw that in the first quarter if we just played the way we know how to play. I mean, the plays were there, we just didn't make them. So, penalties can't do that. Just execution, throwing, catching, running, doing what we need to do, the basics of the game, and we would have been having that success in that first quarter.
How frustrating is it to have that injury when it felt like you were kind of picking up that momentum?
It's frustrating. It's part of the game, though. I've been doing it for a little bit. It is what it is. You just got to be available and get ready to go on Thursday night.
And this is my problem. And Kenny Pickett isn't running away from it. It's not like he's making excuses for himself or saying it's this or it's that. Like, of all the people, Kenny Pickett could play the card of Matt Canada's killing me, and all of Steelers Nation would be like, "Oh yes, Kenny!" Like they'd be patting him on the back. They'd be saying, "We know." But he's not. He's not saying that. He's like, "Look, we got to do the basics." And I think that's where my questions have become, because we're talking about basic things. Like he talked about the Deontay Johnson missed touchdown in the end zone. He thinks that Deontay's going to sit at one spot. Deontay runs a little bit further. But either way, if he just throws it to Deontay Johnson as he's walking into the end zone, it's a touchdown regardless, and it changes the entire tenor of that game. If just all the different things that you've seen from Kenny Pickett that there's times where he is so on point and you're like, there it is. That's the guy that you hope he develops into for 4 quarters and can give you more consistent play. But it's getting to the point where, Allen, like, when is the cutoff point that the Steelers have to see some consistent play from Kenny Pickett? Like just a 3-touchdown game where he looks completely in control, and if things go the right way, he can be the man. When is the cutoff of when that has to happen by? Or is there one because Matt Canada? Is there not one because Matt Canada is the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there is a cutoff, it's sometime next season with a different coordinator. I mean, I think that's probably the way I would answer that question. Like, I can't see that happening this year. And it's not just Kenny. Like, you look at the first drive, like, dots up Deontay. Is the ball a little bit high? Sure, but that's like a pass that every NFL receiver can catch, drop on what would have been a 20, 30-yard completion.
Yep.
Second play, Chooks slips, sacked in 2.5 seconds. Like, and then Chooks gets beat, Kenny gets out of there, and Deontay clangs another one. Like, and then you get a holding penalty. Like, how much of that was Kenny? Nothing. It's the whole offense.
Right. It is the whole offense.
And, I think when you look at Kenny as a college player, things fundamentally changed for him when he got better players around him, and he felt that he could depend on them at a different level. Like, when he got Jordan Addison, he threw balls to Jordan Addison that he didn't throw to anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. When his receivers became more professionalized, they got better. He trusted them to do more and more. When his offensive line got better, he got better at staying in the pocket and waiting guys out. And he looks like the sophomore version of Kenny Pickett, who threw for 8 yards in the ACC championship game, and they couldn't do anything. Right? They ran the ball 40 times because they were afraid. It just does not look like he's a guy that is confident in the players around him doing what they're supposed to do, being where they're supposed to be. They're showing us why he should not be confident in them, because we can see the errors from not just the quarterback position, but from all over the offense as problems, including his coordinator, who he's not going to say anything bad about, but is clearly not done a good enough job either. And I think that makes it really hard to sit there and point at one guy. The problems are many, and I don't know that there's a way that they can fix them all in 1 week, especially not a short week. Like, there's some things they can work on, but the reason that it's possible is those flashes, like Brooks talking about in that clip. Well, that drive in the second quarter where they go 95 yards. Now they don't get a touchdown, but they look good doing it, right? Some of those drives we've seen in the fourth quarter, we know they can do it. It is possible. The execution is so inconsistent that it seems unlikely that they're going to figure it all out anytime soon.
I'm right with you there. I want to touch on this topic a little bit more before we talk about the fact that the Steelers made no moves at the trade deadline on Tuesday, and we got a lot more to discuss here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We got Alan Saunders keep coming at you with a lot of Steelers talk in this episode. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by our partners at eBay Motors, who have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're scouting the waiver wire or getting ready to make the best start on your roster, this is why you need guaranteed fits, and Vinny gives you his guaranteed fits from eBay fantasy picks of the week. Bills rookie tight end Dalton Kincaid has stepped into a big role with Dawson Knox getting hurt. He's gotten hot with Josh Allen the last 2 weeks, scoring for the first time in his career Week 8 against the Buccaneers. Kincaid gets a smash spot in a shootout against the Bengals on Sunday Night Football. Cincinnati has been better in coverage on the outside versus wideouts than tight ends. Dalton Kincaid will once again come through for managers, winning for a midseason pick-me-up at the position. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, you get over 122 million parts and accessories that are available for your vehicle right at your fingertips. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, tail lights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay's Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what parts you need for your vehicle the first time. So go for it. Switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the best parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, I want to revisit this before we talk about the trade deadline and everything. But to me, it just feels like if the Steelers, let's say this persists for the entire season, and the obvious call, I mean, if it persists for the entire season, the one thing we do know, Matt Canada will not be the offensive coordinator after this season. His contract will be up. The Steelers will have no reason to bring him back. That's what that'll be. But if this persists, do you then turn your eyes towards the quarterback position in this upcoming NFL draft class? Do you try to find that answer somewhere else, or at least prepare to find that answer somewhere else? Because then you're sitting here with 2 years of Kenny Pickett and thinking that you haven't seen the growth that you need to see yet here. And again, we're not talking about growth for him to become this super elite quarterback, like to do Patrick Mahomes level things. We're talking about just getting the basics done to run a basic offense. And like again, the play calls aren't my biggest problems with Matt Canada. It's the teaching. It's obviously, it's to me, getting these guys to do basic things in his offense. Because again, they're there, they're available, they're drawn up, but they're not pulled off. And to me, that's the biggest problem. What is your call if that scenario plays out throughout the rest of the season?
I'll go even further. I'll say no matter what happens throughout the rest of the season, they should be looking at drafting a quarterback.
Okay.
The position is too important to continue to take swings at it, even if you think you might be doing good enough with the guy you've got. Mason Rudolph is a free agent. I can't imagine he'll be asked to come back. Mitch Trubisky is a good backup. We've just talked about him being basically every bit as good as the Steelers starter. He's also relatively expensive. If you're ever going to get to a position where you want to pay Kenny Pickett some money, you're not going to want to have an expensive backup. They'll have an opening, get a quarterback in there that you like, have another guy on a rookie contract, start to develop. Even if you're just developing a backup to Kenny Pickett, start taking swings at the position. Kirk Cousins was a plan B.
Right.
Brock Purdy was a plan, I don't know, D.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, right? Like, you can catch lightning in a bottle that way. You can also just find yourself a really good backup quarterback that way, too, and save yourself some money on the salary cap. Either way, it's a position that I think needs to be addressed in this year's draft. Not necessarily saying it needs to be addressed highly, but I think it is a position that they will look to draft this year. It's too important, and it makes too much sense not to.
I'm right with you. If Kenny Pickett doesn't say, well, and this is a guy who's said, I think that Kenny Pickett can be the guy, but if he doesn't show it to you this year, you look even harder. And even if he does show it to you, you still, like you said, you still want to take that shot to see if you could find that guy in this draft class. We'll talk about who's in this draft class some other day. But let's get to talking about
there are about 77 of these podcasts between now and then.
Oh, exactly. If just that, there's probably double that, and that'll probably be how much I actually end up doing. But let's focus on the now, and the now that the Steelers haven't made moves at the trade deadline. Now, I want to be clear. They did get Darius Rush, earlier in the process. It wasn't like they never made moves, this fall. But the trade deadline comes and goes. No moves are made. The loudest that seemed to be all the rumors were pointing to was a potential grab of Jalen Johnson, the cornerback who's been excelling this year for the Bears. No such deal happens. Jalen Johnson doesn't get traded to anybody. Meanwhile, the Niners somehow get Chase Young. The Bears turned into buyers again, and I just don't understand why they're ever buyers and why they keep giving away second-round picks, but that's just who they are, I guess. But again, I look at this move, and I'm not all too shocked, but I do go back and forth thinking, was this the right call for the Steelers, right? Because they could have added to this team right now. They could have added, if they went out and gotten another cornerback who could play with Joey Porter Jr. on the outside, let Patrick Peterson stay on the inside. This secondary could get a lot better, especially when Minkah Fitzpatrick comes back from his injury. Or if you got another safety who could pair with Minkah Fitzpatrick out there, maybe play a little bit better than like Keanu Neal or DeMonte KZ. And we'll get to the secondary in a bit. But just to me, it seemed like there was a window of opportunity here, and it wasn't taken. And it just feels like a little sobering after all the crazy things that Omar Khan has done in his first year and a half, 2 years of being the Steelers GM.
Yeah, I think there was some real smoke about the Steelers adding a corner. I think they absolutely looked into it. I think they looked into making multiple moves at the cornerback position. Jalen Johnson from the Chicago Bears was one that was talked about a lot today. I think there were others. I also think they looked into sending guys the other direction. I think saw Levi Wallace put on Instagram. That was not done without some forethought. I think they probably were trying to make a here and there move, something like that, bring a guy in and send a guy out. One of the problems with trying to buy when you're not in great position is that you learn the lesson that the Chicago Bears learned last year, is that you end up paying more if the rest of your season doesn't go the way you hope. And the Steelers are 4-3 right now. I don't think it would surprise anybody if the Steelers end up winning 9 or 10 games and making the playoffs. I don't think it would be a colossal surprise if they end up losing 9, 10, 11 games either, and end up in pretty good draft position. And now all of a sudden those assets you're trading are worth a lot more. And the other thing is, what is a player on an expiring contract worth to the Steelers? I think that's the are they in a position where they're willing to part with assets for a guy that they're only going to have guaranteed for the next couple months? I just don't know that they're there right now. I think if the right move had come along for someone on a multi-year deal at a position in need, Omar Khan would have pulled the trigger on it. I'm just not sure there was one of those out there for them to make. It was a very quiet trade deadline. I saw, big Montez Sweat and Chase Young, and I was like, and pretty reasonable prices. And I was thinking, we got some real action here today. And then nothing else happened. It wasn't just the Steelers. Almost every contender in the AFC did almost nothing. The Browns traded away Donovan Peoples-Jones. It didn't seem like it was a trade deadline where there were a lot of moves to be made. I'm not surprised that I will say I'm surprised they didn't make any, but I'm not surprised they didn't make a big one. I expected them to do something, but I wasn't expecting it to be a major kind of earth-shaking move.
If you were the GM, would you have been a buyer or a seller, or would you have been neutral for the Steelers?
I would have tried to play both sides of the deck. Man, I think we wrote at SteelersNow.com, myself and Nick kind of laid out a scenario where I was like, I want to get Jalen Johnson, and I want to trade Levi Wallace back to the Bills. I want to try to get Kyer Elam. I think they could get young in places where they're old right now. And I think that's a way they could do it. I'd have entertained the idea of trading Dan Moore. There were very few offensive linemen on the trade block. See what's out there. Broderick Jones can play. Maybe even Chooks. I don't know. But I think that it would have to be that kind of deal where a little bit of in and out. There isn't a place on their roster where they're just so bad that they could make a small move and make a clear upgrade. It's tough. It's tough to make in-season moves in the NFL. You are pretty much who you are by the end of April, and I think they've done a pretty good job. I like this team. I like the talent that's on it. I don't think it needs massive overhauls. Mostly just the players on it aren't playing very well.
That's my thing right there. I think this team does have talent. They need to execute what's on the field.
And when you
more
have those guys
consistently.
on multi-year contracts, it's hard to just throw them away when you know
Right.
that a guy like Mason, like what are they supposed to do with Mason Cole? Mason Cole's not playing very well right now. Okay. He's got this year and another year on his contract. He was great last year. Maybe not great. He was certainly good enough
He was
last
solid.
year
He was solid.
while playing through an injury. Like, are they just supposed to throw him out? I don't know. That's a hard position to be in when you have these guys that are playing below your expectations on multi-year contracts. It's not easy to just replace them. Like it's hard to do.
I agree. It's not easy. And it's why I think that more teams are generally cautious about making moves like that, because you have to consider so much when it comes to replacing talent and replacing personality in your locker room. We got one more thing to talk about, and it's the secondary. I think there's some interesting talking points about things that happened in this Jaguars game that pertain to communication breakdowns, as well as how they're going to handle playing such a team without Minkah Fitzpatrick, their ace in the secondary. We'll get to all that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, want to remind you, this show is brought to you by GameTime.co. But GameTime is where buying tickets for your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. You know why? Because they're going to make it a fast and easy way for where you buy those tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. You get killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee that can't be beat comes into play so that you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're about to have. Just download the GameTime app right to your phone. You can book tickets for any event, whether it's a sporting game or a concert, anything around you. GameTime can get you tickets for. And even if you're booking up to the last minute, or you're even an hour after your event has started, don't worry, GameTime's got you. You still get flash deals on those events with that opportunity there. Also, GameTime, when it comes to buying your seats, makes it so easy. You look at the seat, it shows you the view from your seat, so you know exactly what your view is going to look like when you sit in it. And they removed all the hidden fees. Everything that you're paying is right up front. Just 2 taps of a button at the price that you see, and the tickets are yours. And the best price guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section of row for less somewhere else, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without stress with GameTime by downloading the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, GameTime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders from SteelersNow.com. Alan, want to address something here that even I missed in my first film review. Granted, I was speed reviewing film while I was in Los Angeles trying to recover from a weekend of debauchery at a wonderful wedding. But the big touchdown that the Steelers defense gave up, the only touchdown the Steelers defense gave up on a deep ball, was to Travis Etienne on a 56-yarder where he streaked down the sideline. It looked like live, and even when I looked back at it briefly when I was trying to just look at film when I was in a hotel in Los Angeles, it looked like Devontae KZ just blew it. He jumped the route way too early, gave up the sideline. It was a touchdown. But as reported by you all, with your guys Derek and Nick at SteelersNow.com, and I think you guys were the first team on this, that was not what the call was. The call was actually for Joey Porter to play man coverage in a different kind of a shell. They were disguising what their coverage was. They wanted it to look like cover 2. And Devontae KZ's man was actually Calvin Ridley underneath, and it was Joey Porter Jr. who should have been running with Travis Etienne down the sideline there. This was confirmed by Joey Porter Jr. and Devontae KZ in the locker room. So kudos to your team. That's why SteelersNow.com is awesome. That's why we love having you guys on here. But also, I think it's interesting to hear, okay, coverage breakdown. That's like the first real big mistake that we've seen of Joey Porter Jr. that we can like identify. And we knew it was coming at some point. It's just a miscommunication there. I think communication when Minkah Fitzpatrick is back there, that's a big part of his role. Alan, what have you seen when you look at generally how this unit is communicating and keeping things together? Because despite that one play, I think they did pretty well in a game against Trevor Lawrence with 2 really good receivers and a really good tight end, and limiting them to what they limited them to.
Yeah, I think, we've seen a couple of these throughout the season, right? We saw the one was a rotation on a fourth down on a goal, like a goal line kind of defense where, they needed Patrick Peterson to get back and make a jump to route, and he didn't. We saw one against the Rams 2 weeks ago. They were in zone coverage, actually in the same zone coverage that we're talking about here, where Joey Porter Jr. probably should have stayed with his guy, and instead he was kind of playing outside leverage and let Puka Nacua get a big gain. Those things are going to happen. They're especially going to happen when you're playing a rookie, and you're playing a rookie that played a ton of man coverage when he was in college and has not really been exposed to the nuances of multiple zone defenses like the Steelers are running. This call is like a check from normal cover 2 that basically just, some people call it cover 7. That's what Nick Saban calls it, where he's basically playing like cover 3 on the outside now, where he has to take his man, as deep as his man will go. And the reason you do this is you're looking at the down and distance, and you look at the way the personnel, it's an empty set, right? So you're empty set stress defenses, and they get Cole Holcomb lined up over a wide receiver. Okay. And so empty set, you would think check the man, right? Okay, but you don't want to check the man and man Cole Holcomb against a wide receiver in space. And so what you do is you're going to let Joey Porter Jr. take that outside receiver in one-on-one coverage, and then you're going to build a triangle between the slot receiver, Holcomb, and KZ to cover the other 2 guys. And it's a complicated check. I'm not even necessarily sure it was the right check because of the way that the Jaguars were lined up. I mean, Porter against Etienne is not the matchup that the Jags are looking for, right? They're not thinking Etienne's going to be – if Joey doesn't make a mistake, Etienne's never getting open against Joey Porter Jr. Like, never. Calvin Ridley barely got open against Joey Porter Jr. So I don't really think it's a great call for the Steelers defense to be in there, but that's the one they were in. And I think those things are going to happen when you're playing a rookie. It's one of the reasons the Steelers have been bringing him along slowly. And it's also a thing that's going to happen when you start playing without Minkah Fitzpatrick. You're going to have to do different things on defense that maybe are not the things that you do down in and down out because you're trying to protect someone somewhere else, right? You have a deficiency in your coverage somewhere you're trying to make up for, and then you're asking people to do other things instead.
Yeah. I think that's part of the things that you're trying to cover up more and more things. You don't have guys that are, your X factor guys, and you're trying to force things. That's where communication breakdowns happen. But I also think these are part of the learning struggles that you go through, especially when you have a rookie cornerback out there. And I think that's part of why the Steelers were a little bit hesitant to start Joey Porter Jr. Not that I agree with that decision. I'm not saying that because I was on the get that man out there after week 1 train. But I also think that there's, this is part of what they're talking about is like, hey, we want guys who don't make those types of mistakes out there. We want guys who can, when we call a check, we just want the play executed. We want the play, done that. We'll worry about style points and worry about, the dominance. But if you can't get a guy to be in the place that you want him to be, that's where you're going to struggle. And I think that's where they've been trying to protect Joey Porter Jr. But at the same time, like you said, he was giving everyone fits in that game when it was man coverage and he was running with you. That was a big deal. And they got a big time opponent coming up in DeAndre Hopkins with the Titans after his huge day. He had 3 touchdown receptions from rookie quarterback Will Levis. And we'll get to that tomorrow with our crossover Thursday episode with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. But Alan, I look at this, and again, this was where I thought if the Steelers were going to make a trade deadline move, it would have been to address the secondary, not just corner, but maybe safety as well. Julian Blackmon from the Colts, I thought would have been a really interesting get with his last year of his rookie deal, and the experience that he brings and the talents that he brings. All the different guys that they could have gotten, period. Jalen Johnson in that situation. I think it's interesting that they didn't make a move and saying, hey, we're good with who we got. We're gonna rock out with this crew. And I just wonder, Alan, is that going to come back and bite them as this season continues? Because I think they've had some decent performances, but they've got some better quarterbacks coming down the way very soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got all kinds of options now if they can get healthy. Levi Wallace missed the last game. Looks like Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to miss this one and maybe some more. But I think that's one of the things. Like Wallace was picked on a lot early in the season, but the one that we didn't see was 60-yard touchdowns against him, right? Like, he kept the lid on things. That's why a guy like that is valuable. I don't think there was a lot of players. There were some. Jalen Johnson would have been one of them that were just clear, easy upgrades over what they have, especially if they're going to prioritize bringing Joey Porter Jr. along. If he's going to play the majority of the snaps, I don't know how much they have a need for another corner. But they certainly could have found a long-term upgrade. Levi Wallace is the one guy who was in the starting job at the beginning of the season that they chose not to extend his contract. His contract will be expiring.
Yeah. That was pretty loud.
There's clearly a lack of faith going forward in him, even if they think they're getting okay play from him right now. And I think that's the thing that was missing, was an option that carried into 2024 that they could add to the secondary. I think if they had found that, they'd be able to get that, then they would have pulled the trigger on it.
I feel you on that. And it makes me wonder, what are they going to have to do now to put things together in the secondary to limit those opportunities? But I will say this, by and large, they held it together against the Jaguars. That was a passing offense that I was wondering if they would rip them apart with the weapons that they have and with how good Trevor Lawrence can be at times. But they kept them in check. You limited them to 20 points with very little offense to even help you out or keep you off the field. I think that there are kudos owed to this defense as a whole for how it performed against the Jaguars.
4 straight 3-and-outs, and they give up 6 points.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often.
Right.
That was a good defensive performance.
It was a good. I gave a lot of stars to the defense. I gave a very Halloween grade of a lot of skulls to a lot of the offense. For those who might have missed our stars and skulls grades here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. But Alan, as we look forward here, what's the biggest thing you want to see from this secondary do against a Titans offense that now has a rookie quarterback, a DeAndre Hopkins that's still very talented, Treylon Burks, who's athletic and is going to get after you? What's the biggest thing you need to see from this defense and especially the secondary?
Well, I mean, I think I want to see Patrick Peterson move around more. I want to see more of him in the slot. I want to see a little bit of him at safety.
Agreed.
I think he's the guy that can do the most to replace Minkah Fitzpatrick while he's out. But then even when he gets back, I just think move Peterson around and find some splash. They've been too static. What the plan that they've developed has not been bad. I don't think it's a bad plan, but it's too much of the same. Down in and down out. I want guys moving around, different positions, different looks. Sometimes it's hard to do when you're trying to cover for guys, when you're breaking in a rookie. But I think it's what they need to get more splash out of Peterson and Fitzpatrick. Look at their interceptions. Those two guys had combined for 11 interceptions last year? They had 1, 2?
Yeah.
1? No,
I think
not enough.
1? Yeah, not enough.
Yeah, not enough. I think they got to get those guys going in terms of finding ways to find splash.
We'll see if that happens as this week goes on. Remember, we got a big preview. Crossover Thursday is with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. He and I are going to have an episode that comes out Thursday at midnight going into the game so that you can listen to that or watch that all leading up to the game. Alan and I will both be there at Acrisure Stadium covering the game and all the excitement on Thursday Night Football. Alan, thanks for joining the show as always. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH, at PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. And the Steelers Afternoon Drive podcast with me and Smitty on YouTube and anywhere you can find podcasts. And literally, okay, so we've been working on this and trying to have you on every week. Now this week, I don't know, weird schedule. We'll see. We'll see if we can.
It's going to be tough.
Yeah, but we'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. Alan, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all of that. And you can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts with a positive comment. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again for tuning in. Tune in tomorrow for a Crossover Thursday event where we get you ready for Steelers versus Titans.